You even know the difference between right and wrong?
I know the difference between life and death.
My next decision is the most important that I will make.
Nobody taxing our not on my watch.
I want this case closed.
Now, this is where Season 4 really starts, from Episode 2 onwards. I do think what we saw in 401 was definitely needed. We had to understand the events that happened in the background in terms of Unique survival and also the other events. I think things like Rock's pregnancy, that's something I do think will play a bigger part in terms of later on in Season 4. Maybe when she begins to show a bit of remorse, maybe a bit of regret in terms of the decision she made. I do think she will have a bit of regret. There were also other events such as Mr. Bingham warning Duke about certain societal issues in terms of if she were to join the army, and I do think that's something we may see in 402. So those events that we saw in 401, besides Unique, I do think will eventually play a part the deeper we get into Season 4. Now with that being said, we're going to be running through a very quick preview in terms of what we can expect for Episode 2, looking at all the exclusive images, tying these to some of the teasers we've seen, and generally just an overview and a preview. But let's start with the title and synopsis. Now, Episode 2 is titled It's All Love, and the synopsis reads, Kanan and Rock begin to navigate a new business relationship, just as Unique begins to plot his quest for revenge. Meanwhile, Lou considers a new music opportunity, Marvin goes too far on a side job for Stefano, and lastly, Duke tries to adjust to life in the army. Now, let's start with Rock's meeting with Stefano.
You make me an offer, a better offer than our Vietnamese associate? That would be something worth discussing.
So we've got Rock in a meeting with Stefano where she looks very irritated. We don't know what's caused this at this moment in time, but she really doesn't look happy. Maybe it's Unique who started to hit her operation, or something else, but either way, she is going to be venting her frustration to Stefano. Now this is where I do believe Rock will make her first move in trying to step up the ladder. We've all heard Stefano say, if she can make him an offer which is higher than their Vietnamese friend, which is Quan, then that really would be an offer worth considering. So it does seem like Rock is making her first move in terms of maybe potentially taking Quan's place as the connect. It's going to be very tricky and complicated because she is a woman playing in a man's world, but also because the Italian crime families would have already had an existing arrangement in terms of territories which they control and all of that sort of stuff. Whether they'd be willing to even listen to Rock's offer, I think what Rock wants, she normally does get. And I do think as Season 4 goes on, she will eventually get a seat at the table. But I wonder when and if she does, will Unique cause enough damage to kind of mess up her plan? Just when she's just about to make the deal of her lifetime, I wouldn't be surprised if that's when Unique attacks, and we do see him just watching from his car once again. We saw him watching Ronnie and Juliana in 401, and he's probably doing the same in 402. He needs to know the lay of the land, see what everybody's up to, see what Rock and the Thomases are up to, and then make his move. Now we've also got an image of Rock in a meeting with Andre, her Joe Proctor, who did warn her in 401. She needs to keep her side squeaky clean. Law enforcement aren't particularly looking in the Thomases' direction, but she doesn't want to do anything that puts her and the Thomases back on their radar. That's why I don't think she's going to be too happy when Marvin makes a huge mistake on that little side mission for Stefano. We've got him here with what I think is a cue stick, which most likely matches up to this scene here, where we do see him pull the trigger. A job for Stefano that goes horribly wrong. And this is the kind of thing that Rock doesn't need. They've literally just escaped damage from Ronnie and law enforcement in Season 3, and she doesn't want to be back on anybody's radar, especially with her looking to climb the ladder with Stefano. But as we've heard Snap say, maybe in Episode 2 or later on in Season 4, there's just way too many variables in the game they're in. It's just way too unpredictable. There are certain things that can be in your control, but then there are certain things which aren't. And I do think she's going to be more annoyed because this is something which definitely is in your control. Don't be making any mistakes like Tony Deep. That's something you can definitely control. Although I did ask the question earlier on in the week, will it eventually lead to Marvin's death? I did question this earlier on in my Marvin character arc breakdown, and I personally don't think so. I just think he's a character who's got way too much story left. But no doubt, I'm sure there will be consequences, that's for sure. Now we've also got Kanan and Crystal, and hopefully we find out exactly what's happened with Crystal's pregnancy, because this is the first time we are going to see events that unfold after Season 3, Episode 10. We only found out Crystal was pregnant in 310, so we definitely need to hear what they've decided. Is she going to keep the baby? Are the writers going to retcon this storyline and make her Sean's mother? Or will she lose the baby later on? Is she going to terminate her pregnancy like Rock? I think all of those options are definitely on the table, And I'm sure they will touch on this conversation in 402, or at least give us a hint in terms of what they've decided. We've also got Detective Garcia pressing up on Kanan.
I want this case closed. Squeeze hard on anyone you can.
In the trailer for episode 2, we saw a member of law enforcement being questioned by a bunch of journalists and media reporters, as well as Captain Baptiste telling Garcia he wanted him to press upon any of his informants. Now, we do know Kanan isn't no informant, but Garcia does seem like he is going to be using a bit of force to try and get some information from Kanan, which he's never going to get. Kanan absolutely hates cops. He's never really had a good experience with them, and this just adds another reason as to why. Now, in terms of his operation, we do know he's going to be working for Rock. We've got him in his apartment running his operation with a member of his crew, and I really am intrigued to see him learn and making moves. I think it's a bit too early for him to be setting up to clean his cash, but eventually, I do think we're going to get to that stage where he sets up his car wash business, which was mentioned back in Power. But first, there is going to be a lot of steep learning for Kanan. In one of the teasers that we've seen prior to season 4, we know he's going to have to pay back Ronnie's debt to Snaps and Pop. That's because they gave the okay for Kanan to get rid of Ronnie, as long as they paid off his debt. However, it's not just the debt that needs to be paid. He'll also have to give a nice healthy return on their investment. And I do think Snaps will sense an opportunity with Kanan a bit later on. I think he knows who Rock is, how she's very ambitious, strategic, and smart. And this is her son. Kanan's the same. So why not nurture someone who's in the same mold? I definitely am intrigued to see where it eventually goes with Kanan, Snaps, and Pop. We're also going to hear this conversation that we've had before. Rock will warn Kanan about speaking out of line to Snaps in their place of business. But the conversation will turn to Detective Howard and their business relationship. Rock will tell Kanan, it's one thing not being able to trust her son, but she has to be able to trust her business partners, which I don't think she can. Like I mentioned before, Kanan is very ambitious, and at some point in the near future, he'd want to step out of Rock's shadow and become his own man, so to speak. That's going to happen with, in my opinion, Snaps mentoring Kanan. Now, we've also got Jukebox in basic training, and no doubt, she's going to show us exactly why she's so tough. A lot of these moments that we see with Juke in 402 definitely will help us to understand the Jukebox we later saw in Power, but I also think there's going to be moments with her in the army where she feels maybe isolated. We heard the warning from Mr. Bingham in 401. There are certain societal issues, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Jukebox facing some sort of discrimination, just like she's had to deal with in the past. Back in the 90s, it really wasn't accepted as it is now, and I can only imagine what it was like in the army, where things were probably even tougher. Now with Lou, we are going to see him head back to Queens and Marvin coming to pick him up from Cedar Shores. He mentions in the trailer he's going to be making one of the biggest decisions in his life, and that decision will most likely be getting back into the music industry and working with B Rilla. So we are going to get our first look at B Rilla in season 4 starting in 402. He's sitting in an orange jumpsuit, although we will eventually see him being released and working with Lou on music. But with B Rilla, I'm not so sure if it's just me, but I just really don't have a good feeling. It's just a gut feeling and a prediction, but I think later on in the season, I do think B Rilla may cause Lou a lot more problems. He may not be the hassle that he comes with because of his volatility, and maybe his connections to the streets. So that's just a bit of a long-term predictions in terms of Lou and B Rilla, something that may or may not play out later on in season 4, but let's wait and see. But that's a preview of all things season 4, episode 2, the real start of season 4, where it's time to see Unique's first move. Earlier in the week, I did mention we have to see a first death at the hands of Unique. And could it be the Chinese restaurant owners, or could it be Andre, Rock's lawyer? Let's see which one. Or is it going to be him hitting her transport operation? It has to be at least one of those 3. But drop all your thoughts and predictions down below in the comment section. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.